Hello again, and welcome back to the Slow Flowers Podcast with Deborah Prinzing, episode 551. This is the weekly podcast about slow flowers and the people who grow and design with them. It's all about making a conscious choice, and I invite you to join the conversation and the creative community as we discuss the vital topics of saving our domestic flower farms and supporting a floral industry that relies on a safe, seasonal, and local supply of flowers and foliage. This show is brought to you by slowflowers.com, the free online directory to more than 880 florists, shops, and studios who design with local, seasonal, and sustainable flowers, and to the farms that grow those blooms. It's the conscious choice for buying and sending flowers. And thank you to our lead sponsor, returning for 2022, Farm Girl Flowers. Farm Girl Flowers delivers iconic burlap wrap bouquets and lush, abundant arrangements to customers across the U.S., supporting U.S. flower farms by purchasing more than $10 million of U.S.-grown fresh and seasonal flowers and foliage annually. Discover more at farmgirlflowers.com. Our next sponsor thanks goes to Cal Flowers, the leading floral trade association in California, providing valuable transportation and other benefits to flower growers and the entire floral supply chain. The association is a leader in bringing fresh cut flowers to the U.S. market and in promoting the benefits of flowers to new generations of American consumers. Learn more at cafgs.org. Well, it's spring, so it's also garden book season, of course. Last week you met Teresa J. Spate, author of Black Flora. Today it's my pleasure to introduce you to Riz Reyes of RHR Horticulture, a longtime Slow Flowers member and friend who has authored his first book for young readers and their families. The book is called Grow. And Grow encourages children to discover 15 plants and fungi with life-changing powers and teaching them how to grow plants at home. Riz profiles 15 plants, beautifully illustrated by Sara Boccaccini Meadows, and in each section, readers will meet the often surprising plant relatives. For example, the tasty tomato is a cousin of the deadly nightshade. And they'll learn about interesting plant stories, which are accompanied with step-by-step instructions to grow and care for each one, whether you have a big backyard garden or a sunny windowsill. Here's a little bit more about Riz. Rizaniño Reyes is a horticulturist, speaker, and educator. Growing up in the Philippines, Riz spent his childhood on a fruit plantation managed by his father before moving to the Pacific Northwest at age 7. Upon arrival in the U.S., Riz learned the names of the new and strange flowers that he encountered here, and he continued to nurture his love of horticulture, the art and science of plants, at the University of Washington. Of his work, Riz says he hopes to inspire more young people, quote, especially people of color, to be involved with interacting with nature and learning about the environment. If everyone did this, can you imagine what a beautiful world this could be? He asks. I hope you enjoy our conversation, recorded a few weeks ago inside my cozy greenhouse. I've edited some of the whimsical info-packed illustrations by Sara Boccaccini Meadows throughout the accompanying video, which you can find in our show notes at slowflowerspodcast.com for episode 551. You'll also see some interior pages of the book, as well as find a link to all of Riz's social places and a bonus. I am adding the link to my 2015 interview with Riz when he first appeared on the Slow Flowers podcast. Let's jump right in and get started. Hi, everybody. I'm here in my very special video studio, aka my greenhouse. I asked my friend Riz Reyes to come over and visit, and thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Deborah.
Yeah,
this is nice. It's been a while since I've been in here.
I know, and it's kind of end of winter, so things aren't looking too bad. But the dead stuff's over there. Hey, we've been talking about your debut as an author, and congratulations! I'm so happy for you.
Thank you very much.
For those of you who are longtime listeners of the podcast, Riz is a past guest. He's been a past speaker at the first Slow Flowers Summit. He appears in our video, our Slow Flowers Society video when we went to UW Farm.
Yeah, that turned out beautiful.
Oh, it did. It was great. Elena did a great job. Thanks for letting us do that.
Sure.
And anyway, of course, I love everything about Riz and his work, but the author title he's had for years from writing articles, and now a book.
Yeah, a children's book.
Yeah. So tell us about the book. Congratulations.
Thank you. So this is my first time writing a children's book, and it was quite a process, actually. And so, because in the past, I would always get feedback from other people about, oh, Riz, gosh, you've done so many different things and so many different topics. You have so many different interests. When are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And I've always felt like it was on what? I feel like everything's been written about already. Whether it's flower arranging or, lilies, any hostas, I'm just interested in so many different things.
I know, that's right? The thing. You are an expert in so many different things, and of course, every genus has a book.
Right, exactly. And so why? Why do we need another, book on whatever? So then it got me thinking. I've always wanted to write a book, to be able to say that, have my body of work somehow encapsulated in a thing, that can live on beyond, my years.
A tangible artifact of creativity.
I thought, God, that'd be so amazing, to accomplish something like that. And then I thought about the audience and the typical audience that I present to, and I thought, okay, well, this is sure I could go that route, but then I started thinking about the next generation. Even though people consider me like this next generation, I'm getting up there. I've paid a few dues, right?
You have a few gray hairs. I know.
I do.
I love
that. So yeah, it's an everyday reminder now. Like, okay, it is. You are moving into this stage in your life and career where, take a look back so you can now begin to look forward. Because as you get older, you have to be strategic. Right? Mm-hmm. In terms of taking care of yourself, pacing yourself. Because even, I'm almost 40, not quite there yet, but I'm feeling it, Deborah.
I don't feel too bad for you, but okay, I remember that.
So like now I'm beginning to experience what people are, talking about. Yeah. But that's the thing, right? When you love what you do, you want to be able to do it into your later years. So so I started thinking about, again, this audience, and I thought, well, it'd be great to reach out to a younger audience mm-hmm. and maybe share an experience and a story that they could relate to. Maybe I can share my story mm-hmm. growing up. And because, again, it's all sorts of things, being an immigrant, moving into, to the U.S. and having this really unique interest in plants and flowers. So I figured, maybe that could be my angle. So I'd actually written a story that I was starting to send out to publishers and, getting rejection letters back and kind of understanding this process. And I was working with a mentor who basically kind of coached me through, and I would write, make revisions, and he'd give me feedback and that sort of thing. So that was great. I'm always surrounded by these wonderful people that have been helping me through this process. And I just kind of kept it in the back, in the back of my mind that, okay, maybe someday I'll get this out there. I'll do another revision, get it sent out again. Mm-hmm. And then when the whole world shut down in 2020, I was lucky to still be able to work. But then at the same time, I'm, trying to think about, okay, well, what do I do? How can I engage with, with an audience somehow? And I kind of did what everyone did, make videos and just do a lot of things on Instagram and that sort of thing. And then around this time, in 2020, so mid-March 2020, I get this email from Magic Cat Publishing. And I'm like, okay. So I'm looking at it, and then they're saying, oh, hi, so-and-so. We're a children's book publishing company, and we have this idea for a children's book, and we're interested to find out to see if you'd be interested in authoring it. And I'm like,
that's amazing.
So, but first I'm like, okay, what is this? Like, trying to
Google them and figure
yeah,
it out.
exactly. So they were legit. They had different, titles. They have a beautiful website, and you can see who their target audience was. And so I replied back, and I guess they found me on social media, and they thought that they had this idea for a children's book based on gardening and plants, and they thought that I might be an appropriate author for it. So so we had a Zoom chat, and I got to meet the editor there, and we had this conversation, and they showed me the outline of it, and we looked at it together, and I offered some ideas. And it became this sort of collaboration. And then they're like, okay, well, this sounds great. Can you write us a sample of what ended up being these 15 chapters? So we started with the camellia. That was the first chapter that was written, and in a way that was the ticket, so to speak. So I submitted that, and then afterwards they replied back with a contract.
Wow.
So so that's where it began.
So what is the actual premise? It's for children, what age group, and then also what's sort of the point of the book? What are they trying to communicate?
Yeah. So we kind of try to figure this out together, because they had just a rough outline basically, and then I just kind of threw out some ideas. But in that process, we began to kind of bring it together, and so the first one was the most challenging, because I wasn't sure what it was going to look like, what the layout was going to be, and also I didn't even know who the illustrator was, because one thing I learned in this process that my mentor was telling me, that if you work with a publisher, they typically choose the illustrator for a children's book. So.
Did they have an illustrator in mind when they approached you?
That I don't know.
Oh, okay.
They just mentioned, so we got this idea, and here's the illustrator, Sara Boccaccini Meadows. Boccaccini, excuse me. So I just wrote, and I had my deadlines, and the hard thing was choosing the different plants. But we came up with different themes for each one, where each plant was a hero.
I love that.
And
so creative.
It was
like
cool.
A superhero.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So the plant, whatever the plant's attributes are, you made them superhero-ish sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, what is the camellia's superpower?
So hospitality.
Okay.
was the first thing that kind of came to mind, and I think I chose the camellia because it encompassed a lot of different cultures that use camellia, and of course we think tea.
We're drinking our tea, right?
So whether you're in England or in China, tea plays a role in cultures and ceremonies, and your morning cup of tea and that sort of thing. So then I started thinking about these different plants, and that's how I went to I made those decisions as to what plant will have a superpower, and try to draw from that. And so to me, then I started thinking, wow, these plants growing up, if you really think about it and you really study them, each plant has a story, and we've heard that phrase before, and I wanted to extract some of those stories and bring them out. And it was nice to think about children as the audience, because I'm so used to speaking to women and 40 and above, basically it was my audience, right? So I'm comfortable there,
Yeah.
So but here it's a young child, and so in a way I can be I didn't have to I did change my language and how I present and how I write. So that was difficult, but the editorial team was great, because they took what I wrote and basically simplified it, so without changing things completely. So that was really helpful. But it was easy to actually just state a fact and be good with it, versus I feel like when I'm speaking to an older audience, I had to elaborate and really
like sell them on the idea.
Yeah. Whereas here it's just a simple fact, and that's it.
Well, we're going to show some of the photos. I'm going to edit them into our conversation so people can see some of the first the beautiful cover, and then the interior photos, photos of the illustrations. Tell us the illustrator's name again.
Sara Boccaccini Meadows.
Okay, and she's British, but she lives in New York.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw her on that Zoom
Mm-hmm.
book event you did, and it seemed like you both jumped right in and brought your best to this project. She loves to illustrate for children, but she isn't necessarily a botanical illustrator,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was in our conversations. We put it out there in terms of like things we were uncomfortable about, that we weren't sure of. But it was great because there were a few things that I struggled with in my process, and it was good to hear that she went through the same thing as well. So this is basically her first title as well as a full-on illustrator for a children's book.
Wonderful.
But she's done other projects before. Actually, one project that she has, because of course when I learned who the illustrator was going to be, I immediately looked her up online, and her Seattle Chocolates was one of her projects.
Really?
Yeah. So I was like, gosh, these drawings look really familiar. But it was just fun to finally meet her and to learn about each other's process, because I was kind of going through mine, because obviously this was my first time writing a children's book.
Well, Riz, the thing that's so interesting about talking about switching it up to having a young audience is, it seems like you were coming full circle, because you so often talk about growing up, around plants, and that was just a natural part of your childhood. But many kids these days don't have that in their childhood. So you were trying to recreate a little bit of that wonderment that you felt probably when you first became obsessed with gardening and plants.
Well, I have to acknowledge, and I do acknowledge the fact that I was a weird kid, and I'm going to embrace that, till my last days. And I think that's the thing. Each kid is weird, whether they like it or not. And of course, we try so hard to want to fit in and to be accepted. And I definitely went through that phase. And I think every child does, as they find themselves, right? And I think I was so lucky to find myself in plants. And that's why, to me, they are my superheroes,
Yeah,
So
I love it.
that's kind of like, wow, that's really kind of what it is, because it was such an escape, and plants taught me so much. And when things weren't so great, at home, plants were like, plants rescued me, basically, by showing me all the different things that they did that were just unbelievable.
It ignited your curiosity that you've had that propelled you into university and to a profession, and what you couldn't imagine doing anything else, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it certainly felt that way, especially when it comes to work and a job. Like, gosh, what can I there's so many different things that I could have done, but this was such a natural pull, and I was fortunate to have people around me that helped nurture that. But at the same time, it's it still took work. There were times where it wasn't so great, and where you doubt yourself, because it's one of those careers that really I think my parents wanted to discourage me from pursuing, because there was a lot of uncertainty. But also in their mind, it was sort of like, we brought the family to the U.S. and to have a better life and a better future, and here's my son, my youngest son, wants to play with flowers and play in the dirt and grow plants. What is this? You could have stayed
back in the Philippines and done
pretty
that,
much,
right? Yeah.
But I'd like to think that there's so many different aspects to horticulture and different opportunities that I've had to hopefully show them that, like, look, here's something that, even though my where I'm living, the clothes that I wear, my hobbies, like, don't reflect, that, but as a person, and what my profession has taught me, to be the person that I am, I think speaks volumes to, my income, I guess.
And I think it's really, it's inspiring that you found your way in a profession that, not a lot of people looked like you when you started. You were often, the youngest, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've just created this life for yourself in plants. And it feels like, to me, the floral design was also part of Full Circle, because you used to love flowers when you were very young, and
Yes.
you were like, you would enter competitions, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit how you rediscovered floral design. And is there any floral design in Grow?
A modification or a version of it. But in the planning so this is the exciting part for me now that the book's out and we're hopefully, getting to a point in this pandemic where we can meet and gather, are the projects and the workshops that I want to do with kids that will definitely include floral design.
I bet.
Because it's the building blocks, and I basically want to teach children or share my experience with children, my own journey to horticulture, which began with floral. So it's a matter of getting something that's accessible. Here in my case, it was going to the grocery store and seeing these beautiful plants, and then wanting to know their names, and then wanting to learn where they came from. So yeah, exactly, like you said, we really became full circle in this process.
How much floral design are you getting to do these days? Because you are working at a hospitality company, and you have amazing gardens. Do you cut from them? And
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's nice that I can kind of pass that baton on to our gardeners that work there, and also I helped design and plant the gardens at McMinimans Anderson School from the very beginning. So of course, when I'm planting things, it's like, okay, this will be a good cut, sort of thing.
I need extra foliage at that time of year or whatever.
And now we're in our 6th or 7th now growing season. Yeah, like we're clipping, we're cutting, and actually have a bucket for you of stuff that I want to do for you. Yeah.
Ooh.
So it's one of those things where we can just, because they need it. They need to be trimmed. They need to be pruned. The dogwoods need to be coppiced. We have curly willow that needs to be coppiced. So we have all this so-called product, but I don't refer to it as product. But it can be that allows us to make arrangements for the hotel and.
Do you make them for the hotel?
Occasionally,
or do you have your team members do it?
We switch up.
Okay.
So it's one of our morning tasks is to check the floral arrangements in the front desk. And whoever has time that morning will do a refresh,
So the McMinimans Anderson School is in Bothell, which is north of Seattle. But then you're also, and what's your actual title?
Gardens manager.
Gardens manager, because you have a second property now in Tacoma, right?
Yeah, well, so that one is so I supervise the gardener that's there.
Okay.
So I give my insight because I helped open that property as well.
What is that called?
So that's McMinimans Elks Temple.
Elks Temple, okay.
Downtown.
I've been there once. It's a landmark in Tacoma, right?
It's a beautiful building,
right.
And next to the beautiful city hall there. And there's what we call the goat garden now. It's the goat lot. We call it that because it was this empty lot for years, just covered in blackberry and just junk, and so it hasn't been touched for a while. But since McMinimans purchased it, thinking, we'll do something with this space, my boss hired a goat company, I guess you could call it.
The ruminants.
Rent a ruminant was the name of the business. Yeah.
And what, they cleared the lot for you?
Yep. They every year she would bring in the goats, and they became this attraction to the city, And they did an incredible job. Like, they mowed it down completely. And that's the thing, to get rid of blackberry, just have to keep at it. So now it's referred to as the goat lot or the goat garden. And now the gardener there is turning it into an urban farm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
so it's not on the side where the steps are.
Yeah, the Spanish Steps, something that's on the other side of the building. That's another historic landmark.
Right.
But we planted on each side of the steps there as well. So we maintain the gardens there as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Do you think you can squeeze a little cutting garden in there?
I know the gardener there, actually, she wants some cutting, plants there. So we're just hooking her up with all sorts of extra divisions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, she got some peonies. And, of course, there's always extra dahlia tubers. So, she's got her cutting garden there as well. And so it's, wow, a lot. A
lot. So if you're in Tacoma, you want to see Riz's work, go to the Elk Lodge, McMinimans, or come to Bothell to where I think there's a bigger landscape there, right? The acreage is larger at Anderson School.
Yeah.
Someone was talking about Edgeworthia, and I had this picture in my mind of those mature ones that you must have planted when you first started, and that stop people in their tracks when they're in bloom, right?
Yes, and that's the goal, And it's the funnest thing too, because people are so struck by it, like, what is this plant? It looks like it's dead, but then it has these yellow pom-poms, and
Like right about now, right?
They're just about finished right now. But yeah, they're always an attraction, and everyone asks about them every single year, and I like that. I want people to notice and see something different and unusual.
I think Riz, what you're doing is, well, we notice it because we're plant freaks, but there is this category of human who I call like having nature blindness. Like they walk by plants and they don't notice them. So you almost have to grab them with these exotic surprises to stop them in their tracks. And it sounds like you've done that in every season.
And for me, being a gardener in the Pacific Northwest, I feel like it's our duty to have diversity in our planting schemes in the gardens here. Because it's like, why not? Why do you not take advantage when you are the envy of the nation and the world of being this horticultural mecca,
Because of the cultural conditions.
Yeah, because of the cultural conditions. And, so in some ways, if you want to represent diversity in people, you also, why not, in our landscapes, in our gardens as well, because each of these plants also come from different parts of the world. And that's my jam. I mean, that's how I want to show my work. And whether it's floral or in the garden, I love texture. I love being able to showcase each of these plants in what I do.
And you do that in your floral design. You cannot really be categorized as having an aesthetic other than a horticultural design aesthetic, because you don't put, from my observation, you don't put anything in a vase or in a bouquet as filler. Everything has an intent and to show that unique beauty of that plant.
And there's many different ways, and I'm still learning how things can go together. And that's one of the beautiful things that I love about the work that I get to do. And I also mentioned it in my introduction in Grow, is this, again, a very common phrase that I say again and again, is we never stop learning, right? And that's one of the things I love about what I do, is you're not held to, there's standards, but even with that standard, there's always something, beyond that. So with floristry, I make the time to take a workshop or to befriend florists and to just expose myself to different bodies of work, to learn different mechanics and to just see what you can do. So I have all these wonderful mentors now that have gotten to me, that have been able to take part in workshops. And what I've loved about this process, it's been very reciprocal in that they teach me mechanics and techniques, and I teach them different plants that they can use.
Do.
And
it's mutually beneficial.
It is. And it's been so fun because it almost has kick-started this enthusiasm. And it's sort of like, to me, that's something that's so common. Like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. Is this like new trend, or is this new thing that florists are after? And I love that collaborative feel.
Yeah, that's so cool. So you talked about starting a Grow. Your first chapter that you wrote was Camellia. Give us a couple other picks that you want to make sure people look for when they buy the book, and maybe be curious about how you express that particular plant.
Yeah. So choosing plants for this book was like, choosing your own child almost, and like, what's your favorite?
What, only 15?
How can you do that? Not that I want 15 children, but no, it was, I had to think about, because I can easily come up with 15 favorites, list them down and write about that. But again, know your audience. And I feel like I've been so alienated from this audience. I had to really take a step back and, start writing. What do you feel like a kid will understand and will see, in this process? And there were some that are just like, that's too complex, or that's just, how can they relate to that? So I try to focus on things that they would recognize. But then we started to introduce introduce families. And because they might not know the family, but they're sure to know a member of that family.
Okay.
So that helped in terms of coming up with the selections.
So then give me an example of one of the families that you
So Bromeliaceae. So
Okay.
the bromeliads.
So they don't know bromeliad, but they know pineapple?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's an everyday fruit they're familiar with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then it's about finding facts that they might find interesting. And for me, that was actually the fun part. Also the most tedious and frustrating because I felt like I needed to really research, okay, what are we going to find interesting? Because I had to look beyond my own knowledge about the particular plant or plants and find these facts that will hopefully resonate with the reader.
That help tell a story about that plant or that family.
Yeah. So a lot of history, a lot of mythology, folklore, and that sort of thing, and also plants that have impacts from different cultures.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot actually in this process, thinking, oh, okay, I know these plants, I know a lot already. But again, it goes to show how you're always learning in this process. So yeah, like the pineapple, for example, learning about its origins and where it was native to. I didn't realize it was native to it early on, but also its background and how in the Victorian era, how it was. I didn't realize it was this prized fruit that symbolized wealth. And it's just like, oh, okay, and that's why they referred to the leaves as like a crown. Like, oh, okay, like I could definitely see that now. And then also how the motif of the pineapple was used to represent artwork and stonework in large estates and houses to signify that yes, this is this exotic plant. We are wealthy, kind of thing.
Interesting. The plant explorers brought the fruit back to the conservatories of England.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I thought it was interesting when I watched your online book launch that you talked about mushrooms being a big challenge.
Yes. Because
did you choose it or did they ask you to include it?
I decided to torture myself with this chapter because I love mushrooms. I love to eat them, but I never fully delved into the life cycle and the process of mushrooms. I knew basics of it, but I really had to research and explain. And we actually had to go back and forth with the editor to make sure, like, okay, this makes sense. This is correct. Because the last thing I want is a mycologist coming to me and be like, you should have done this. You did that was wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I did my part. Let the editorial staff just kind of fill in the blanks for me. But again, it was just finding fun facts about it. But what we really wanted to communicate with mushrooms was, they're the heroes of communication, collaboration, and how they all work together to bring different organisms together to work and symbiosis of organisms that occur when you're dealing with fungi. So that's
a great way to teach that.
Yeah,
I love that.
So I felt like, okay, as complicated as mycology can be, and not really knowing any of the Latin names of the different mushroom species, even. I felt like, okay, I need to challenge myself.
You stretched on that one.
Yeah, and so I'm glad I got through it. Hopefully it came through okay. But I also did enjoy a lot of the fun facts that came with it. Like truffles, and I love Sara's illustrations too with the pig. That sort of thing, and hunting for them.
So she would take what you wrote and then go off on some crazy, not crazy, but like whimsical way to illustrate that. Which, of course, the children maybe even look at the photos before they read the words. Maybe an adult is reading the words to them. Yeah,
and that's another thing, too, that it wasn't until the very end of the book when I got the last proof and when they began marketing the title was, my focus was, of course, this is going to be a children's book. But in a way, I think I still had that part of my voice always speaks to the adult.
Right.
So then they did a beautiful job in incorporating my words and not only having it for kids but for adults as well, which meant it can be for the family.
Right.
So
the parents and grandparents are going to buy this book anyway and
hope
give
so.
give it to the child.
Yeah.
But they can experience the book together because you put these projects in the book.
Yes.
So what were some of the fun projects that you came up with? Are they ways to get kids to interact with plants?
A lot of it is to interact with plants, and a lot of it is for them to understand some of the basics of plant growing.
Okay.
So, for example, in the apple chapter, so again, that was a big family, and so I could have been the rose, right? But then I'm like, okay, let's do a food spin onto it. What's the most common like fruit people will know that's in Rosaceae? Of course, it's the malice, the apple, and of course the different stories and folklore and history behind all that. They had really I wrote a lot for that chapter, and of course they pared it down.
It probably could have been a whole book in and of itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I wanted to, of course, represent the family. But the project for that one is to grow an apple from seed, which in some ways kind of made sense. A lot of children learn about Johnny Appleseed and you could really grow an apple tree from a seed. When in reality, I mean, sure, but the type of fruit that you'll get probably won't be the same. But I still want them to try it.
So you actually tell kids how to pull the seed out of the core of the apple and germinate it.
Well, I'd like to think that they can figure that out for themselves in terms of what the seed is.
I mean, that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah. But the main lesson that I had that was beautifully illustrated actually was a simple viability test.
Okay.
And it's something that can be used for all seeds. So let's say you have an old packet of seeds, is this still good? Or will this seed grow? And it's a simple putting in a glass of water, and the floaters you toss out, the sinkers you plant. So usually if a seed sinks, it means it's still got the endosperm and a viable embryo in there that'll still grow. But if it floats, it's pretty much a dud. And so that was the main thing I wanted to.
It's so easy for anybody to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And exactly. Kids and adults, it's a simple viability test that even the professionals use. And then there's the added sort of, hey, for fun, you can plant it and grow your own apple tree. And then, it could be several years. And of course I didn't get into, grafting and that sort of thing. Although we did mention it, and it's illustrated, and that's what's done to produce apples, commercially, is you have to graft them.
Oh, how cool.
So, and again, another beautiful illustration that shows that, again, how would kids recognize these things, For me, it was I geeked out about this sort of stuff, I was teaching my 5th grade class in elementary school how to tea bud a rose. I was that obsessed, as a kid.
Wow.
So, but just a glimpse, a simple drawing and a simple explanation to get them curious, to be oh, what's that process? Oh, do they just take sticks then and shove it into a big part, into a tree, and then it can grow a tree, and that's supposed to make it fruit faster? Have them ask these questions. So to go beyond the book, and I think that's why the format, the way Magic Hat Publishing has put this together, it's a little tidbit, and I think of it as the perfect book to have in a doctor's office, with the highlights magazines and everything else, And
even if you only opened it to one page, there was something to capture your attention.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
That's so cool.
And if they were successful to grow an apple from seed to have a tree, how cool, is that? But
that's so funny.
It's about the process, get them to start asking questions and to be curious.
I love it. This has been so much fun.
Yeah.
I have purchased Grow to send to a young friend of mine.
Oh, great.
And I have the PDF, so I will share some of the pages when we broadcast this interview so people can get a teaser. But, of course, we want people to go to their local independent bookseller and purchase Grow. And, Riz, are you going to – you have a calendar of events on your website, right?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I'm getting a few dates nailed down. And a lot of requests, but also, like I mentioned earlier, excited for some of these events where we can, springtime, summertime, and the different locations around Seattle. Maybe they'll send me to different parts of the country. Oh, I just heard some news too. So they're publishing the book in multiple languages.
Awesome.
Wow.
So just the translation alone is a big undertaking.
It is. And actually, I got an email just recently from a Polish woman that say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'm translating your book into Polish. And of course, there was questions in terms of, because she wanted to get the translation right. And and here I am learning a little bit about, the language. And so that's pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So kids around the world can learn these hear these stories, learn these facts, and encourage, hopefully, a next generation of gardeners.
Oh, I'm really inspired to hear about that.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So happy for you.
Thanks, Deborah.
We are going to have this episode in our show notes at slowflowerspodcast.com for episode 551.
Wow.
I know.
Wow, already.
So
congratulations, Deborah.
I know. I don't know how to stop. So we'll share photos and you'll get to find Riz's social places and more about him. And the link to your earlier podcast interview. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
much.
that was a while back.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me again. This was really fun and it's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining our conversation. Wow, I have known Riz for more than a decade, and while our friendship began through horticulture and garden writing, it's definitely evolved into a shared appreciation and passion for cut flowers and floral design. If you want to learn more about this inspiring guy, as I said, come find all the links at slowflowerspodcast.com for episode 551, including a link to order Grow for yourself. Our next sponsor thanks goes to Store It Cold, creators of the revolutionary CoolBot. Save thousands when you build your own walk-in cooler with the CoolBot and an air conditioner. If you don't have time to build your own, they also have turnkey units available. Learn more at storeitcold.com. Last week's Slow Flowers Journal Online includes a report called Flowers for Ukraine, highlighting some of the efforts of our Slow Flowers community and others in the floral industry in raising funds and awareness to help Ukraine. I'll share the link in today's show notes for you to read more, but I want to direct your attention to a special international floral event taking place next week on Wednesday, April 6th, with Britain-based floral designer and sustainability influencer Shane Connolly. Shane is a past guest of the Slow Flowers podcast, as are some of the British flower growers representing Flowers from the Farm, with whom Shane is partnering for a virtual floral design demonstration. The demonstration takes place Wednesday, April 6th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and 7 p.m. British Standard Time in London. Shane's demonstration will use only locally grown and seasonal British flowers and sustainable mechanics. This special event is close to the hearts of the Slow Flowers community. Flowers from the Farm is donating the flowers, Shane is donating his time, and the tech firm responsible for filming and distribution is donating their services for free too. According to Jillian Hodgson of Flowers from the Farm, their aim is to get 1,000 people paying £10, which is around $13 US, each to watch, thus raising £10,000 for the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal to help the relief effort in Ukraine. She wrote this to me in a recent email. Watching a flower design taking shape from the safety of a comfortable sofa could seem crass and absurd at this awful time. But a period of peace, beauty, and quiet words, an hour spent with the beauty of flowers, it's never wasted. We all need to be reminded of the healing power of nature and the hope it gives us in the future. That's quite beautiful, Jillian. And you can find the link to donate to this cause and receive the link to watch Shane's heartfelt demonstration. If you're unable to watch at that time, it'll be available to watch later. So I've got the link in our show notes at episode 551. I hope you join me. I'm going to enjoy watching Shane. A final sponsor thanks goes to flowerfarm.com, a leading wholesale flower distributor that sources from carefully selected farms to offer high-performing fresh flowers sent directly from the farm straight to you. You can shop by flower and by country of origin at flowerfarm.com. Find flowers and foliage from California, Florida, Oregon, and Washington by using the Origin Selection tool in your search. It's smarter sourcing. Learn more at flowerfarm.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. The Slow Flowers podcast is a member-supported endeavor, downloaded more than 830,000 times by listeners like you. Thank you for listening, commenting, and sharing. It means so much. As our movement gains more supporters and more passionate participants who believe in the importance of our domestic cut flower industry, the momentum is contagious. I know you feel it too. If you're new to our weekly show and our long-running podcast, check out all of our resources at slowflowerssociety.com and consider making a donation to sustain Slow Flower's ongoing advocacy, education, and outreach activities. You can find the donate button in the column to the right at slowflowerspodcast.com. I'm Deborah Prinzing, host and producer of the Slow Flowers Show and the Slow Flowers Podcast. The Slow Flowers Podcast is engineered and edited by Andrew Brenlin. The content and opinions expressed here are either mine alone or those of my guests alone, independent of any podcast sponsor or other person, company, or organization. Next week, you're invited to join me in putting more slow flowers on the table, one stem, one vase at a time. I'll see you next week.